The space station called Nexus was one of the biggest places in the known galaxy. It floated in the darkness between three star systems, and millions of beings from hundreds of different worlds lived and worked there. Ships came and went every hour, carrying goods, travelers, and dreams from one corner of the universe to another. The station never slept. Its lights never dimmed. Life moved through its corridors like blood through veins, always flowing, always busy. In the lower market district, where the lights were not so bright and the crowds were not so rich, a figure sat alone in the corner of a small plaza. He had been sitting there for 3 days now. His name was Or, and he was a. They were known throughout the galaxy. Every child learned about them in school. Every adult remembered the stories. They were apex predators, the most dangerous hunters that evolution had ever created. They stood nearly 8 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in scales as black as the space between stars. They had 4 arms, each one ending in claws that could cut through metal. Their eyes glowed like fire, amber, and orange, and they could see in total darkness. Their teeth were sharp enough to bite through bone. Long ago, they had been conquerors. They had swept across star systems, taking what they wanted, destroying what they did not need. Entire civilizations had fallen before them. Then, 200 years ago, a great war had ended with a peace treaty. They agreed to stop their conquests. In return, they were allowed to join galactic society. But being allowed and being welcomed were two very different things. Or knew this better than anyone. He had come to Nexus Station looking for work. His home world was poor now, its resources spent on wars that had ended before he was born. Many left to find jobs among the other species. They took the work that no one else wanted. They loaded cargo. They guarded dangerous shipments. They did the hard, ugly jobs that others refused. But even for these jobs, someone had to hire them first. Or had visited every cargo company in the lower district. He had gone to the shipping offices, the warehouse managers, the transport coordinators. Each time the reaction was the same. The moment he walked through the door, everyone stopped what they were doing. Eyes went wide, bodies went stiff. Some beings ran. Others reached for weapons they were not supposed to carry. A few just stood frozen, too scared to move or speak. No one would hire him. No one would even talk to him long enough to hear his offer. So he sat in the plaza and waited. He did not know what he was waiting for. Perhaps a miracle, perhaps nothing at all. He had enough credits to buy food for another week. After that, he would have to leave, return to his home world in shame, another rejected by a galaxy that could not forget the past. The beings of Nexus Station moved around him like water flowing around a rock. They gave him space. Lots of space. Shop owners on the edges of the plaza pulled their goods inside when they saw him. Parents grabbed their children and hurried away. A group of traders, small blue-skinned beings known for their friendly nature, actually changed direction and walked the long way around the plaza rather than pass within 30 feet of him. Or watched them go. He did not blame them. He understood fear. His species had spent thousands of years teaching the galaxy to be afraid. That kind of lesson did not fade in just 2 centuries. Sometimes the station security would come by. They never spoke to him directly. They just stood at a distance, watching, their hands resting on their weapons. They were not there to protect him. They were there to protect everyone else. After a few minutes, they would leave and or would be alone again. On the 3rd night, it rained inside the station. Nexus had a weather system, artificial clouds that released water on a schedule to keep the air fresh and the plants alive, or sat in the rain and did not move. The water ran down his scales and pooled around his feet. He did not mind. On his home world, the rains lasted for months. This was nothing. A small shop nearby sold hot drinks. Through the window, or could see beings of many species sitting together, talking, laughing, sharing warmth. A family celebrated a birthday. A pair of human traders made a deal with a handshake. 3 engineers argued about something on a data pad, their voices loud but friendly. Or looked away. He thought about his life back home. He had a small dwelling in the mountains, nothing special, just 4 walls and a roof. He had no family, did not form families the way other species did. They were solitary by nature, coming together only to mate and then separating again. He had never minded being alone before. Alone was normal. Alone was safe. But sitting here, watching all these different beings live their lives together, he felt something he had never felt before. He felt the weight of his solitude. He felt how empty his existence had become. He had lived for over 200 years, and in all that time, he had never had a friend. Not one. He had never shared a meal with someone who was not his own species. He had never had a conversation that was not about work or war or survival. He had never been looked at with anything other than fear. The fourth day began like the others, or sat in his corner. The crowds flowed around him. The shops opened and closed. The security officers came and went. Nothing changed. Nothing ever changed. Then, in the middle of the afternoon, something did. A human woman walked through the plaza. She was small by standards, barely 5.5 feet tall, with brown hair tied back and tired eyes. She wore the uniform of a medical technician. Beside her walked a child, a boy of maybe 6 or 7 years. He had messy brown hair and a curious look on his face. The woman was looking at her communication device, reading something on the screen. She did not notice that her son had stopped walking. She did not notice that he was staring at the massive in the corner of the plaza. And she did not notice when the boy let go of her hand and started walking toward him. Or saw the child approaching. His amber eyes tracked the small figure as it moved closer and closer. He waited for the fear to appear on the boy's face. He waited for the scream, the cry for help, the panicked retreat. It never came. The boy walked right up to him, stopped about 3 feet away and looked up. His eyes were wide, but not with fear, with curiosity, with wonder. "Hi," the boy said. "Why are you sitting all by yourself?" Or stared down at him. In 200 years of life, across dozens of worlds, no one had ever approached him like this. No one had ever spoken to him first. No one had ever looked at him without fear in their eyes. He did not know what to say. So he told the truth. "Because no one wishes to sit with me." The boy thought about this for a moment. Then he sat down on the ground beside the massive predator, crossing his legs and resting his chin in his hands. "I'll sit with you," he said simply. And somewhere deep inside, or something that had been frozen for 200 years, began to thaw. The boy's name was Danny Carter. He was 7 years old, and he had lived on Nexus Station for almost 2 years now. Before that, he had lived on Earth, in a small town in a place called Montana. He remembered green fields and blue skis and a house with a red door. He remembered his father teaching him to ride a bicycle. He remembered being happy. Then his father got sick, and everything changed. Greg Carter had been a good man. He worked as an engineer, fixing machines and solving problems. He loved his wife Lisa and his son Danny more than anything in the world. When the doctors told him he was dying, he spent his last months making sure his family would be okay. He helped Lisa find a job on Nexus Station, far away from Earth, where the pay was better and the opportunities were greater. He recorded hundreds of video messages for Danny to watch as he grew up. He did everything he could to prepare them for a life without him. Then he was gone. Danny did not understand death at first. He was only 5 years old. He kept asking when Daddy was coming back. He kept waiting by the door, expecting to hear his father's voice. It took a long time for him to accept that some people leave and never return. Lisa had brought him to Nexus Station 3 months after the funeral. She thought a fresh start would help them both. In some ways, she was right. The station was full of wonders, full of strange and amazing things. Danny loved exploring the different districts. He loved seeing all the alien species. He loved learning about their cultures and their worlds. But at night, when the lights dimmed and the station grew quiet, he still missed his dad. Lisa worked long hours in the medical center. She was good at her job, and the station needed medical technicians badly. Most days, Danny went to the station's school, where human and alien children learned together. After school, Lisa would pick him up and they would walk home through the lower market district. It was their routine, their small piece of normal in this strange new life. On the day Danny met, or Lisa was distracted, there had been an emergency at the medical center, a transport accident that had injured dozens of beings. She had worked a double shift and had barely slept. When she picked Danny up from school, her mind was still back at the hospital, going over charts and treatment plans. She did not notice when Danny stopped walking. Danny had seen the day before, sitting alone in the corner of the plaza. He had asked his teacher about the big alien with the glowing eyes. The teacher had told him that were dangerous, that he should stay away from them. But Danny did not see anything dangerous. He saw someone sitting alone, and he knew what that felt like. So when his mother was not looking, he let go of her hand and walked over. There was even bigger up close. His scales were so black they seemed to swallow the light. His forearms were thick with muscle. His claws were long and curved and looked very sharp. But his eyes, those glowing amber eyes, were not scary at all. They were sad. Danny knew what sad looked like. He had seen it in the mirror for a long time after his dad died. "Hi," he said. "Why are you sitting all by yourself?" They stared at him for a long moment. Danny could tell he was surprised. Then the alien spoke, and his voice was deep like thunder but soft like a whisper. "Because no one wishes to sit with me." Danny thought about this. It did not seem fair. Everyone deserved to have someone sit with them. "I'll sit with you," he said, and he sat down. For a while, neither of them spoke. Danny looked around the plaza, watching the people go by. He noticed how they all walked around them, how they kept their distance. He noticed the shop owners watching from their doorways. He noticed the fear on their faces. "Why is everyone scared of you?" he asked. They made a sound, something like a sigh. "Because of what my kind did long ago. We hurt many people. We took things that were not ours. The galaxy has not forgotten." "But that was a long time ago," Danny said. "You weren't even there, were you?" "No, I was not yet born." "Then it's not your fault." They looked down at him and something changed in his eyes. The sadness was still there, but there was something else now too. Something that might have been hope. "What is your name, small one?" he asked. Danny Carter. What's yours?" "I am Caldur." "That's a cool name. What does it mean?" "In my language it means, one who walks in shadow." Danny nodded seriously. "I like it. Can I call you?" Or was quiet for a moment. "No one has ever called me anything but my full name." "Well, friends use short names, and we're friends now, right?" They did not answer right away. He seemed to be thinking very hard about something. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "I suppose we are." Lisa found them 10 minutes later. She had been frantic, running through the plaza calling Danny's name, her heart pounding with terror. When she finally spotted him sitting beside the massive, she nearly collapsed. "Danny," she shouted, running toward them. "Get away from there." Danny looked up at his mother with confusion. "Why, it's nice." Lisa grabbed Danny's arm and pulled him to his feet. She positioned herself between her son and her body shaking with fear. But she did not run. She stood her ground, ready to protect her child. Or slowly raised his hands, showing his palms, showing that he meant no harm. He had seen this reaction 1,000 times before. He knew what to do. "I will not hurt him," he said quietly. "I would never hurt a child." "Mom, it's okay," Danny insisted, tugging at her hand. "He's my friend. He was lonely, so I sat with him, just like you told me to do when someone looks sad." Lisa looked down at her son, then back at She saw the fear on the faces of everyone around them. She felt the fear in her own chest, but she also saw something else. She saw the way Or had raised his hands. She saw the gentleness in his glowing eyes. She saw that he had not moved, had not threatened, had done nothing but talk to her boy. And she saw Danny, her brave little Danny, standing there without a trace of fear, defending his new friend. She took a deep breath. "You really were just talking?" she asked. "Yes," Or replied. "Your son approached me. He asked why I was alone. No one has ever asked me that before." Lisa looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Danny, who was watching her with hopeful eyes. "Please, Mom," he said, "can we stay a little longer?" Lisa thought about her husband, about how Greg always said that kindness was the most important thing. She thought about how lonely Danny had been since they came to the station. She thought about all the things she had taught her son about treating others with respect. And she made a decision. "Okay," she said slowly, "we can stay for a little while." Danny's face lit up. He sat back down beside Or, and after a moment's hesitation, Lisa sat down too. It was the beginning of something none of them expected. The weeks that followed were like nothing Or had ever experienced. Every day after school, Danny would drag his mother to the plaza where Or waited. At first, Lisa stayed close, watching with careful eyes, ready to grab her son and run at the first sign of danger. But as the days passed and nothing bad happened, she began to relax. She started bringing her work with her, sitting on a nearby bench and reviewing medical files while Danny talked with his new friend. And Danny talked a lot. He asked Or about everything. What did eat? Fish and meat mostly, though they could survive on almost anything. Where did they live? In the mountains of their home world where the air was thin and the storms were fierce. How old was Or? 237 years, which made Danny's eyes go wide with amazement. Did have families, not like humans did. They were solitary creatures who preferred to live alone. "That sounds sad," Danny said one afternoon. Or considered this. "It is simply how we are. We do not miss what we have never had." "But you have me now," Danny pointed out. "And my mom, we're like a family, right?" Or did not know how to answer that. The concept of family was strange to him, something he had observed in other species but never understood. But when he looked at this small human boy sitting beside him, chattering away without fear, he felt something warm in his chest, something that might have been belonging. "Perhaps," he said, "perhaps we are." As time passed, other beings on the station began to notice the strange friendship. They whispered about it in shops and restaurants. They pointed when Danny walked through the plaza holding one of Or's massive clawed fingers. Some thought it was cute. Others thought it was crazy. A few thought it was dangerous and demanded that station security do something about it. But security had no reason to act or had not broken any laws. He had not threatened anyone. He had not caused any trouble. He was just sitting in the plaza, talking to a human child and his mother. There was nothing illegal about that. Slowly, almost without anyone noticing, things began to change. A shopkeeper named Myra was the first. She ran a small food stall near the plaza, selling hot drinks and sweet pastries. For weeks, she had watched Or from a distance, too afraid to approach. But she had also watched Danny, seen the way the boy laughed and played without any fear. One morning, she gathered her courage and walked over with 3 cups of warm spiced tea. "Would you like some?" she asked, her blue hands trembling slightly. Or looked at her with surprise. No one had ever offered him anything before. "Thank you," he said, taking the cup carefully in his clawed fingers. Myra smiled, a nervous little smile, and hurried back to her stall. But the next day she brought tea again, and the day after that. And soon she was sitting with them, listening to Danny's stories and occasionally adding some of her own. Others followed. An engineer named Tusk began nodding to Or when he passed by. A human cargo worker named Pete started saying hello. An elderly woman who sold flowers gave Danny a small plant to give to his big friend. The circle of fear around Or slowly grew smaller. Not everyone was happy about this. There were beings who believed that could never be trusted, that their violent nature was built into their blood and bones. These beings complained to the station council. They wrote angry messages on the public networks. They warned that something terrible would happen if this monster was allowed to roam free. Or heard the whispers. He saw the hateful looks, but he also saw Danny's smile, and that made everything else seem small and unimportant. One evening, as the station's artificial sun dimmed toward night, Danny asked a question that caught her off guard. "Do you miss your home?" The thought about it. He thought about the black mountains and the purple skis. He thought about the rain that lasted for months and the lightning that danced across the clouds. He thought about the empty dwelling that waited for him there, the solitary life that stretched out before him like a road with no end. "I miss parts of it," he admitted. "The storms, the mountains, the smell of the rain." "What do you like about being here?" Or looked down at the boy. "You," he said simply. "I like you." Danny grinned. "I like you too." Lisa had been listening from her bench nearby. She got up and walked over, sitting down on Or's other side. Over the past weeks, her fear had faded almost completely. She had seen how gentle the was with her son. She had seen him retract his claws whenever Danny got close. She had heard him speak softly, move slowly, do everything in his power to avoid frightening anyone. "You're different from what I expected," she said. "Most people expect a monster," Or replied. "That is what our history has made us." "History is just the past. It doesn't have to define your future." Or turned his amber eyes toward her. "Your son said something similar. He told me that the things my people did were not my fault because I was not there." "He's a smart kid." "He is. You have raised him well." Lisa smiled. "His father would have liked you, I think. He always said we should judge people by their actions, not their appearance." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the station's lights flicker on one by one as night settled in. For the first time in his long life, Or felt like he belonged somewhere. He felt like he mattered to someone. He felt like maybe, just maybe, the galaxy was not as cold and cruel as he had always believed. He did not know that in 3 days, everything would change. The accident started in the reactor section, deep in the heart of the station. A faulty valve, a missed maintenance check, a small problem that grew into a big one. The first explosion was felt throughout the entire station, a deep rumble that shook the floors and rattled the walls. Then came the alarms, loud and sharp and endless. Emergency protocols activated. Bulkheads slammed shut to contain the damage. Fire suppression systems sprayed foam and chemicals. Station security rushed toward the reactor section, trying to figure out what had happened. But the damage was worse than anyone realized. Secondary explosions rippled through the lower districts. Power systems failed. Life support began to shut down in sections. And worst of all, toxic fumes from the reactor began to leak through the ventilation system, spreading through corridors and compartments like invisible poison. Thousands of beings were trapped, including Danny and Lisa. They had been in the lower market when the explosion started. They had tried to run, but the bulkheads had closed too fast. Now they were sealed in a corridor with 30 other survivors, watching the toxic warning lights turn red, feeling the air grow thick and hard to breathe. Lisa held Danny tight, trying to stay calm, trying to think of a way out. There was no way out. But somewhere on the other side of those sealed bulkheads, Or was coming. And nothing in the galaxy was going to stop him, Or was on the far side of the station when the explosions began. He had been meeting with a cargo company manager, one of the few who had finally agreed to give him a chance at a job. When the floor shook and the alarms started screaming, his first thought was of Danny. He did not wait for instructions. He did not look for shelter. He ran. The station was chaos. Beings of every species were rushing through the corridors, pushing and shoving, desperate to get away from the danger. Emergency lights flashed red and orange. Smoke filled the air. The sound of explosions echoed through the metal walls like thunder. Or moved through the crowds like a shadow. His 4 arms helped him push aside obstacles. His powerful legs carried him faster than any being around him. His eyes cut through the smoke as if it were not there. Within minutes, he reached the entrance to the lower market district. The bulkheads were sealed. A group of station security officers stood nearby, talking into their communicators, their faces pale with worry. A rescue team was setting up equipment, preparing to cut through the heavy metal doors, but their tools were slow. The process would take hours, and the toxic readings from the other side were climbing higher with every passing minute. Or walked toward the sealed bulkhead. A security officer stepped in front of him, holding up a hand. "Sir, you need to stay back. This area is restricted." Or looked down at the officer. "My friends are on the other side." "I understand, but we have protocols. The rescue team will." "Your protocols will take too long. They will die." Before anyone could stop him, or strode past the officer and placed his 4 hands against the bulkhead. The metal was thick, designed to withstand explosions and decompression. It was supposed to be impossible to break through by hand. Or was not most beings. He dug his claws into the metal and pulled. His muscles strained. His scales darkened with effort. A terrible sound of tearing metal filled the corridor. The security officers stared in disbelief as the apex predator literally ripped the bulkhead apart with his bare hands. Beyond the door, the corridor was filled with thick yellow smoke, the toxic fumes from the reactor leak, or could smell the poison in the air, feel it burning his lungs. For most species, even a few breaths would be fatal. For it was painful but survivable. His people had evolved on a world where the air itself was often toxic. Their lungs could filter out the worst of it. He plunged into the smoke without hesitation. The destruction inside was worse than he had feared. Support beams had collapsed, walls had crumbled, small fires burned in pools of leaked fuel. Emergency lighting flickered weakly, barely cutting through the yellow haze, and everywhere there was silence. No voices, no cries for help. The fumes had already knocked most survivors unconscious. Or moved fast. He checked every compartment, every corner, every sealed space. He found a group of trapped under a collapsed ceiling and lifted the debris off them with one arm. He found a human woman struggling to breathe and carried her toward the exit. He found a child alone and crying and gathered him up gently, careful not to scratch him with his claws. But he did not find Danny. He did not find Lisa. He went deeper. The explosions had been worse toward the center of the district. Whole sections had collapsed. Bulkheads that were supposed to stay open had slammed shut. The air was so thick with poison that even or could barely see. His lungs burned. His eyes watered, but he kept going. He found them in a sealed maintenance corridor. 32 survivors were crowded into the small space. They had managed to seal the door before the worst of the fumes reached them, but the air was running out. Some were already unconscious. Others were gasping, their faces pale, their movements slow. Lisa was pressed against the back wall, holding Danny tight. The boy's eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. He was still alive, but barely. Or tore the door off its hinges. Lisa looked up at him with desperate eyes. "You came." "I will always come," he said. "Can you walk?" "Some of us can, the others." "I will carry them. Follow me. Stay close." What followed was a nightmare of smoke and fire and endless corridors. Or led the survivors through the destruction, his body shielding them from falling debris. When someone fell, he picked them up. When the path was blocked, he cleared it. When a pocket of flame threatened to engulf them, he smothered it with his own body, letting his thick scales take the heat. He made 7 trips in total, 7 journeys into that toxic hell. 7 times he went back for more survivors, refusing to leave anyone behind. The rescue workers outside could only watch in amazement as they emerged again and again, carrying the injured, the unconscious, the dying. On his 7th trip, he found the last group of survivors huddled in a storage room. He gathered them up and began the long walk back to safety. He almost made it. The secondary explosion came without warning. A fuel line that had been damaged in the initial blast finally gave way, sending a fireball roaring through the corridor, or threw himself over the survivors, protecting them with his body. The fire washed over his back, burning his scales, sending waves of agony through his nerves. Then the ceiling collapsed. A massive support beam came down on top of him, pinning him to the floor. The weight was enormous. He could not move. He could not breathe. The toxic fumes were finally overwhelming even his powerful lungs. Darkness crept into the edges of his vision. He was going to die here. He had saved over 100 beings. He had gotten Danny and Lisa to safety. It was enough. It had to be enough. Then he felt something touch his face. Small hands, warm hands, human hands. "Wake up, please wake up." Danny's voice, Danny's face appearing through the yellow smoke. The boy had come back. He had escaped the toxic zone, gotten to safety, and then turned around and come back. For him, for the monster that everyone feared. "You have to get up," Danny said, tears streaming down his face. "You're my friend, you can't leave me. You can't leave me like Daddy did." Something stirred inside, or something stronger than pain, stronger than exhaustion, stronger than the weight of the beam crushing him. Love, that was what humans called it, love. He had never understood it before. He understood it now. With a roar that echoed through the entire station or pushed against the beam, his muscles screamed, his bones groaned, his scales cracked under the strain, but he did not stop. He would not stop, not while Danny needed him. The beam shifted, rose, fell aside, or staggered to his feet. He could barely see, he could barely breathe, but he could see Danny standing in front of him, reaching up with both arms. He picked up the boy and held him close. And together they walked out of the fire, or did not remember collapsing. He did not remember being carried to the medical center. He did not remember the doctors and nurses working desperately to save his life. He only remembered Danny's face, Danny's voice, Danny's small hands on his cheeks. Then there was darkness, long, deep, peaceful darkness. He woke up 3 weeks later. The medical center was quiet when his eyes finally opened. Soft lights, gentle beeping from the machines monitoring his body, clean white walls, a window that looked out over the station's central garden, where trees and flowers from a dozen different worlds grew side by side. His body hurt, every part of him hurt, but he was alive. "You're awake." Lisa's voice, or turned his head slowly and saw her sitting in a chair beside his bed. She looked tired, like she had not slept much, but she was smiling. "How long?" he managed to ask. His voice was rough, barely a whisper. 23 days. The doctors weren't sure you would make it. Your lungs were badly damaged by the fumes. Your spine was cracked in 2 places. You had burns over 40% of your body." She paused. "They said it was a miracle you survived." "Danny." "He's fine. He's at school right now, but he's been here every day after classes. He reads to you, tells you about his day. I think he believes you can hear him." "I could," or said. "Sometimes in the darkness I could hear him." Lisa reached out and took one of his massive hands in both of hers. Her fingers looked so small against his claws, so fragile, yet her grip was strong. "You saved 117 people," she said. "The station council counted 117 beings who would have died if you hadn't gone in there. Humans, you saved them all." Or closed his eyes. He remembered the smoke, the fire, the weight of the beam, the certainty that he was going to die. "Danny saved me," he said. "He came back for me. He should not have done that. It was dangerous." Lisa laughed softly. "Try telling him that. He said you were his friend and friends don't leave each other behind. I think he gets that stubbornness from his father." They sat in silence for a while. Outside the window, a small bird from Earth landed on a branch and began to sing, or watched it, marveling at its tiny wings, its bright feathers. Such a small creature. Such a beautiful sound. "What happens now?" he asked. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. The station council has been discussing you. A lot. The whole station has been discussing you actually. What you did. It changed things. Changed how people see, changed how they see you." She pulled out a data pad and handed it to him. On the screen was an official document with the station council seal. "They want to offer you a position on the emergency response team. Full benefits, full pay, a permanent residence on the station," she smiled. "They also want to give you a medal. Apparently, it's the highest honor the station can award." Or stared at the document. For 200 years he had been rejected, feared, avoided. Now they wanted to give him a medal. "I do not understand," he said. "People are complicated. We make judgments based on fear and history and things we've been taught. But we can also change. We can learn. We can see past our prejudices when someone shows us a reason to." She squeezed his hand. "You showed us. You showed everyone." 3 days later, when Orr was finally strong enough to leave the medical center, he found a crowd waiting outside. It started small. A few of the survivors he had rescued standing by the door wanting to thank him, then their families, then their friends, then strangers who had heard the story and wanted to see the hero for themselves. By the time he walked out the door, hundreds of beings filled the corridor. They did not run, they did not scream, they did not reach for weapons. They applauded, or stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sound. He had never heard applause before, not for him, not ever. Then a small figure pushed through the crowd and ran toward him. Danny launched himself at Orr's leg, wrapping his arms as far around it as they could reach, which was not very far at all. "You're okay," the boy shouted. "I knew you'd be okay, I told everyone." Or looked down at the child who had changed his life. This small, brave, stubborn human who had approached him when no one else would, who had sat with him when he was alone, who had come back for him in the fire. "I am okay," he said, "because of you." Danny grinned up at him. "We're friends, that's what friends do." Lisa appeared beside them, and then Myra the shopkeeper and Tusk the engineer and Pete the cargo worker and dozens of others. They gathered around Orr, reaching out to touch his arms, his shoulders, his hands, not with fear, with gratitude, with acceptance, with love. The months that followed brought more changes than Orr could have imagined. He accepted the position on the emergency response team. His strength and resilience made him perfect for rescue operations, and he threw himself into the work with dedication. Others who came to the station found a warmer welcome than they expected. Some of them even found jobs, homes, places where they belonged. The fear did not disappear completely. 200 years of history could not be erased in a few months, but it grew smaller, quieter, less powerful. Or got his own quarters on the station, a small apartment near the lower market district. But his favorite place was still the plaza where he had first met Danny. He would sit there in the evenings, watching the crowds flow by, and now, sometimes, they would smile at him. Sometimes they would wave. Sometimes they would stop and talk. Danny still visited every day after school. They would sit together on their bench, the 7-year-old boy and the 200-year-old predator, talking about everything and nothing. Lisa would join them when her shift at the medical center ended, bringing food and stories and laughter. One evening, as the artificial sun painted the station in shades of orange and gold, Danny looked up at his friend and asked a question. "Are you happy?" The thought about it. He thought about his long life, about the centuries of solitude and rejection. He thought about the cold mountains of his home world and the empty dwelling that waited there. He thought about how different everything was now. "Yes," he said finally, "I am happy." Danny smiled and leaned against Orr's side. "Good, because you deserve to be happy. Everyone does." Or looked down at the boy, this tiny human who had seen past the scales and claws and glowing eyes. This child who had offered friendship when no one else would. This small, brave soul who had shown him that even an apex predator could be gentle, that even a monster could find a home. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For sitting with me, that first day, when everyone else walked away." Danny shrugged like it was nothing. "You looked lonely, and my dad always said that the bravest thing you can do is be kind to someone who needs it." Or nodded slowly. He looked out at the plaza, at the beings walking by, at the station that had become his home. He thought about all the who would come after him, who might find acceptance because of what had happened here. He thought about the future, and for the first time in his long life, it did not seem so dark. "Your father," he said, "was very wise." Danny smiled. "Yeah, he was." They sat together as the lights came on across the station. Two friends from different worlds, proof that even in a galaxy shaped by fear and history, kindness could still change everything. And somewhere out there, among the stars, other lonely souls looked up and wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was hope for them too.